Hey gang, what's up? So recently I've seen two films in cinema. One was Wish, and one was good. Maybe a bit harsh, but Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, God that's a long title, deserves the praise it achieved. I knew little to nothing about this film before watching it, having only seen the original 4 films and read the first book. I didn't know practically anything about this prequel story besides knowing it was about President Snow and his fall to darkness. I also didn't see or hear much promotion for the film until a lot of my friends at college started talking about it in quite positive ways. In this review, I want to refine my analysis from previous videos by focusing in on certain aspects of the film in more depth. I also want to find what made this film stand out in the rush of mediocre blockbusters that came out in 2023. Songbirds and Snakes draws from the 4th novel written by Suzanne Collin in the Hunger Games series, a prequel to the original 3. Written in 2020, Collins believed that there were further stories to be told in the world of Panem and really flesh out the Hunger Games' evolution. On a budget of 100 million USD, this story expands on the world of the Hunger Games in meaningful ways using the Battle Royale concept. It brings back the original director, cinematographer, producers, and composer as the original 4 films, which creates this cohesive narrative. The core cast includes Tom Blythe, Rachel Zegler, Hunter Schafer, Peter Dinklage, and Viola Davis, among many others. To begin, let's look at the origin of the Hunger Games overall. Collins has mentioned in interviews that while she was a young age, her father fought in the Vietnam War. Her mother tried to shield her from news broadcasts, but eventually she saw graphic images of what was happening in the war on the news. This would be enough to traumatize a child, especially with loved ones out there. Later in life, she found herself channel surfing, finding images of the Iraq War and reality TV shows sort of blurring into one. This incited her idea of the Games, a reality TV show in a post-war era where children brutally fight to the death. It's a premise that analyzes the inner workings of reality TV, both for the participants and the wider world, along with putting across these views of oppression. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes follows Coriolanus Snow. At this point, rather than being a miserable old man, he's in his late teens during the 10th annual Hunger Games, during which he and the other top performing students in his class are selected to be mentors during this year's event. Snow is given Lucy Gray of District 12. They work together to keep Lucy alive and desirable in the public's eyes. Following this, we see the aftermath of the Games this year. This film is able to stand on its own, but gives weight to those original Hunger Games films. Expands on Snow as a character and confirms his dark history that will lead to him being this oppressive man in the future. This particular Hunger Games is also a very interesting one to study, seeing as it's the first one that was fully televised with a host, which really started it on the line to the full-on reality show that it became during Katniss' era. My main takeaway from this film was the consistent and constant layering of Collins' rich world building. Songbirds and Snakes really caught my attention as it was a film I wasn't really asking for, but heavily expands on the legacy of the originals with a story worth telling. As an adaptation, the film is in safe hands, seeing as this is a returning production team who have worked with this saga before, along with Collins herself as a producer. I'm glad that she had a hand in the production to keep the story on track, but wasn't the writer of the film. Writing for novels and for screenplays are 2 very different jobs and should be carried out by different people. Now, just to be clear, I'm coming at this from a filmmaking perspective, seeing as I haven't read the book because I am lazy and blind, and just want to assess what I'm seeing here. I have looked through online to see what this book is all about and the extra details that weren't included in this film. Songbirds and Snakes takes place 64 years before Katniss' route for the game, and the world of Panem reflects this. We see a world with more limited technology, using standard cars, trains, and clothing. They also really lean into the post-war aesthetic. There is a larger focus on the capital this time round, seeing as we're following Snow directly. We really get to understand how capital society functions. It's by no means as grotesque as it is in Katniss' era, but the groundwork is all there. The costuming seems limited as the capital hasn't truly established its wealth yet. The people's fancy and insulting costumes are still yet to come, but you do get this unique fashion sense, like the dresses that they wear as part of their school uniform. It was also crucial to see how limited the control of the Hunger Games was in this period. All these elements build up this recovering post-war society that hasn't truly set its identity permanently yet. Everyone is still trying to figure out how to move forward, but look united to the other districts as a front. Additionally, I appreciate how much the film brought up the hunger aspect of the Hunger Games far more than seen previously. You can see that without the hold of the reality TV aspect of the games, The tributes were really just left to their own devices with nothing for the singular day event. By the time we reach Katniss, the formula for the game has been realised, and the capital spend as much time as they can with the tributes, feeding and pampering them due to gambling wages. Here, Lucy Gray and the other tributes remain in the same clothing from the reaping until many of their death, feel a need for their energy and nutrition. These are people who are really struggling. The Hunger Games are still being developed, and the District Rebellion still has a partial hold in society. This makes this a chaotic and highly unpredictable game that is later scratched from the record within World, further showing how much control the capital are willing to keep and limit the public view. In a society that's trying to flourish, having its prized games fall apart in front of the public eye is not a good look. I appreciate the care that went into this world building. It's not often that we get to see these days. It's intriguing to understand Snow's lineage and background. We're told that his father was once in a place of power with a wealthy fortune before falling in the war and that fortune going away. This puts Snow at a fascinating place at the start of his story, being a top performing student who's destined to go on to university, but his family is penniless. On the other hand, there's his friend Suzanne, whose father brought them into the capital from District 2. These two characters are good foils for each other as they have opposing world views due to their upbringing and heritage. Suzanne is employed to intensify Snow's darker hubris and fall into shadow, while Snow comes from a background longing to be a part of the capital through his heritage. Suzanne is trying to work his way in, but still representing the districts and trying to stand up for them. It's ideal splits like these that make the world building truly interesting. The other key player in Snow's personal life that expands on the themes and ideals of the world is Tigress, who is briefly seen in Mockingjay. Tigress is the leverage, struggling with the same issues as Snow, but dealing with them in a very different way. She brings about his lightness due to her family relation to him, and remains to be quite a crucial part of his life going forward until she's disregarded. However, as soon as Snow gets involved in the games, Tigress fades into the background, loosening her grip on him. At this point, Lucy Gray is his priority and his family isn't taking much hold in that. Lucy Gray herself is a very good setup for Katniss later down the line. Crazy to think that 64 years later, Snow is still after a teenage girl from District 12. Lucy channels Snow's humanity and kindness until he sees her as a loose end. At the end of the day, as much as he cares for her, his own progression is what he values the most. It's always been a core part of this character, and it's great to see this explored in more detail. I briefly want to mention how happy I was to discover that the film's production team was largely the same as it has been previously with these films. Although I wasn't the biggest fan of all of the Hunger Games films, this does create cohesion. You get that continuity in style and filmmaking as well as the world building. All of the people who work on this film really cared about the source material and want to stay loyal to Suzanne and her needs. Hearing James Newton Howard's fantastic score really brought back the atmosphere of the original film. Subconsciously, this realigned my brain to this world and dynamic. It's a fantastic score that also uses themes diegetically, so that's fun. It felt fresh with its younger world and new faces, but still had the core and ideals of the originals. Behind the camera, this team did an excellent job. Now, these characters are realised beautifully by their various cast members. This bit may take a while as there were many standout performances, starting with the film's lead, Tom Blythe. Blythe is an English actor who will be pushed into the limelight following his success in this role. I really believe the depth and tragedy of this character, seeing the darker layers present even in his most human moments. Unlike recent villain prequels like Cruella, this film isn't intent on redeeming this character, but more proving him as an active antagonist. Understanding the world through his eyes really builds on the original Katniss trilogy on rewatch. I can clearly see how this character will become Donald Sutherland's version in many decades to come. Our other lead is Rachel Zegler as Lucy Gray. This comes off the back of Zegler's breakout role in Steven Spielberg's 2021 West Side Story, with anticipation for Snow White, Disney's latest reimagining that oh boy. What annoys me here is how incredible her performance is. With her recent comments about Snow White and the controversy surrounding her, I had little faith, but now I can see that she is a truly talented performer that deserves these sort of roles. I'm conflicted. It's comments like she's been making in her Snow White interviews that destroy what should be successful careers. Anyways, in this feature, I'm glad they cast an actress in this role that can actually sing, and quite well at that. Zegler sang live during her scenes, which is quite demanding for long filming days, and doesn't work for me in films like Les Mis. But in this instance, it allows her to feel more like the character and in the moment. Lucy Gray is a fierce woman, but with vulnerabilities. This makes her feel way more real and is something that modern blockbusters are really lacking with their female characters. The trick is always in the writing, and she is written very well and performed well at that. She provides an excellent foil to Katniss later down the line. You do see a connection between the two, and what it looks like they've gone for is that Katniss has mimicked certain aspects of Lucy and not the other way around. Other performances worth mentioning were the works of Viola Davis and Peter Dinklage. Davis provides this maniacal Dr. Gould, who, aside an impressionable look, delivers on a classic unhinged doctor trope. Kind of reminds me of the Metropolis guy a little bit. Having seen a lot of Davis's other work, mainly in the Suicide Squad films and the series How to Get Away with Murder, I am able to see the strengths and passion behind this character. I see a drive to create these new mutations and put people in their place. You really understand that this is a woman who lived through the dark days of the war and the revolution, and she doesn't want to make that happen again through control and her own experiments. Viola Davis is a powerhouse who will not let this revolution take hold. On the other hand, Dinklage's Casca Highbottom is a more understated antagonist, who antagonises Snow's family as he had connections to his late father. Being the man responsible for the game's creation, he carries this deep regret and guilt and naturally tries to whisk that away with heavy drinking. It's horrific for him to think that not only will his games continue, but thanks to Snow's intervention over this film, the games might even get worse for people and make the capital more prolific. Dinklage's filmography is extensive over the years, with titles such as Game of Thrones, the Narnia series, Ice Age, and various comic book movies. I do find it funny that two of the people causing controversy over the Snow White film are both in this film and playing against a character whose surname is Snow. How ironic. Plus, there are many other actors who define their characters in this film, namely Hunter Schafer, Jason Schwartzman, and Josh Andres Rivera. Go see the film to enjoy their performances. Now, many people have an issue with the length of this film. Overall, it is 2 hours and about 40 minutes, but I think that that's necessary. And the reason for that is because it deals with the structure and pacing very well. I've heard there was about an hour of footage cut from this film, and they were considering making it 2 films, but I'm glad it stuck as one. It had all of the necessary ingredients in it and cutting all the extra fluff. After all, anyone who wants the full story in even more depth should go and read Collins's novel. This feature is well structured into 3 parts that appear on screen, which really nicely lays out Snow's progression throughout the film. I probably would have lost interest if this was 2 parts, as that would have meant that the film probably ends after the actual Hunger Games, and then you see the aftermath next time, giving you time to think about what could happen next, which you didn't really need or want. This would have resulted in an underwhelming, kind of bland film that just meanders around a bit, like Mockingjay Part 1 did. Well, this definitely wasn't one that I intended on reviewing, but praise following its release in November really made me check this one out. I believe this came out at the perfect time for me, in proving that sequels still could be good. These days a lot of franchises are just making sequels for the sake of making sequels and money. Here we've got a dedicated story that's actually worth telling and thought through. These days, studios are also becoming over-reliant and obsessed with CGI and not paying these people enough to do this hard work. VFX is hard, guys. So I did appreciate that this film took a more natural route with these larger sets and just expansive world building. It was a fully realised outcome that really used its budget wisely. This proves that people are actually interested in stories they aren't really aware about but are worth telling, rather than spin-offs of characters they've seen hundreds of times. But let's be honest, breaking new ground is more exciting in this industry, rather than repeating stories that people have just worked out for themselves in the meantime. Cinema should be challenging and constantly refresh itself, and that's exactly what this film does. This film does have its references and connections to the main film, but nothing outrageous, and it just kind of ties everything together rather than hindering the film. Overall, I think this film is a perfect addition to the collection of Hunger Games films, both expanding on them and bringing its own fresh meat to the table. I'm gonna rate this film a 7.5 out of 10, and if you want to see me rank this one alongside the 4 previous films in this series, please let me know in the comments and I will do a little ranking video on that. Much like Wish last week, I would be interested in looking into more depth with this film and comparing it to other elements in its predecessors. So if you'd like to see any aspect of that, please also let me know. Feedback for these videos is also greatly wanted. On top of that, as I mentioned at the end of my last video on Wish, go check that one out if you haven't already. If you'd like to see me review all of the Disney animated movies from Snow White to Wish, please subscribe to the channel. I'll only make this video if I hit 100 subscribers, so let's hope we get that because it's actually kind of what I want to make. Thank you for your continued support, and if you're new around here, hi, I'm Nick and I make this sort of stuff. Go check out some of the other videos I've got going on here. I do various things throughout the week just to add to my portfolio. Christmas is coming up soon, so expect a review on an old classic. My friends might know what that means. In the meantime, stay safe and have a good week. Till next time.